All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. My name is Lisa Jasinski, and I'm the Special Assistant to the Vice President for Academic Affairs. And I am joined today by two new colleagues in the Department of Information Technology Services, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Marta Moreno. I'm the new Training and Outreach Specialist in ITS, so I do training for faculty and staff.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Hearn. I'm the new instructional designer here at Trinity, and my job is to assist faculty, mostly faculty, with instructional design, so T-Learn building, Zoom trainings, all that kind of good stuff, and to assist them with any classroom measures that they would like to improve teaching with.
Great. I'm so glad that both Martha and Kevin are joining me in this work around what we have formerly called digital measures. They're going to be really wonderful resources moving forward. So any questions you have, they'll be kind of the first line of defense. But I'm really grateful to have a little bit of your time today so that we can talk a little bit about digital measures. For some of you, this is a familiar product. You've used it for the last 2 years, going into the third year. For some of you who might be new to the institution, this might be your first time doing it. So we're going to cover a lot of things today. We're going to sort of talk a little bit about what the software does, and then we're going to really roll up our sleeves, and it's going to be a pretty pragmatic nuts and bolts training session. I'll also mention that we have recorded today's session, so many colleagues, if you're watching at home at your own pace, please let us know if you have any questions by reaching out. I'll give you some information on the very last slide. Today's training is really designed to be interactive in nature, so it works best if you have digital measures kind of up in front of you. I have a link right here, and I don't know if Kevin or Martha if it's possible to put that link in the chat for the folks that are here today, just how to get to digital measures. And then it's in all of the emails that I send to you. But we'll get that in the chat, and then we can talk a little bit about what this program is all about. I will say that digital measures in the last year, and we work with another product called Workflow, and I'll tell you about both of those and what they do. They have gone through what I think is kind of an unfortunate rebranding. So now it is called Faculty Success, which is a term that I have not fully committed to in my own mind. So I might still call it digital measures, and but I have tried on all the slides to kind of include both terms so that you know when I say digital measures, that's what I mean. I usually kind of the first things first, I want to make sure that everybody is in the right room, so to speak. We are still piloting the software. We are in the third year of piloting the software. And I just like to tell everyone that only a handful of departments are participating. So I've listed the departments on the slide. And I say that, so if you're in one of those departments, you're in the right place. And if you happen to bump into a colleague who is not in one of those departments and they look at you with a really puzzled look, it's because they're simply not in the system yet and they have no idea what you're talking about. The population that uses it is any full-time faculty member who completes what we call an annual summary of professional activities, an annual SPA report. So if you are a part-time faculty member or a staff, you might have a different role to play in digital measures, but I just want to assure you that you're going to be continued to be evaluated annually using the standard university policies, procedures, and timelines, and you can learn more about that from the Human Relations Office. My goal is that by the end of today, you'll feel really confident about what kind of information you need to put into the system. You'll feel like you have some dexterity with entering that data into the system, and you will be ready to submit your annual review on Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. And also, finally, again, you'll kind of know exactly when and how to get help if you need it. So what is digital measures or faculty success? It's an online faculty database. It's a piece of software that we maintain locally. And it's every faculty member can use it as a repository to keep their personal information regarding things like teaching, research, and service, the things that normally constitute an annual faculty evaluation record. Um, the nice thing about the software is that it allows the information to be used differently for different purposes. We're going to talk primarily about the annual merit process, but I'm joined today by two faculty who are in real live attendance, who are also in programs that have national accreditation. The fact that this information is already culled together in one place makes accreditation activities a lot easier. And historically, there would have been people looking at CVs and kind of retyping information. This makes this a little bit more efficient. Ultimately speaking, we might, think about using it as an institution in different ways in the future. Some institutions take the information right from the system and they use it to pre-populate the profiles that faculty have on the web. We could also use it in something like our Impact magazine. And we can also work with Jane Costanza in the library to think about using it as a kind of a backup system for digital commons. I do like to tell people right now that we kind of aren't at that point yet. We need to have more than 9 or 10 departments in the program. And when we get there, we will definitely have sort of much more clear kind of data use policies and expectations. But right now, our use is really limited to the annual faculty activities and accreditation. But the phrase that they like to talk about when they talk about this product is enter your data once and it lives forever. The concept being that once you put this information into the database, we know that it can serve a lot of different faculty purposes. And ultimately, from an institutional standpoint, we're glad not to keep asking you to telling us the same information over and over and over again. When you first log into Digital Measures, you're going to see a whole list of different links. This is just a static screenshot, but I'll take you to the dynamic screen in just 1 second. And the thing that I like to tell people up front is that this program will potentially track a lot of different kinds of information about a faculty member. The thing to keep in mind is that not every field will apply to every single faculty member, and they won't apply to every faculty member every year. So it's entirely possible that this year you didn't have any media appearances. It's entirely possible you will never have media appearances in your faculty career, but we keep it as part of the process because we know that faculty excellence comes in lots of different flavors. And if it applies to you, you can click it and you can enter information. We know that it would be pretty daunting to try to fill out the full history of everything you've done in your career. So really, we keep our scope really focused to the most previous year, and that's because of our work with annual accreditation. So if you had some amazing publications in 2001 or 2005, you won't need those necessarily as part of your 2021 annual faculty evaluation. So you can keep the scope a bit narrowed, just talk about the last 365 days. And the third piece is, I'll show you this today, information that Trinity has in an existing database, we bring it into the system on your behalf. So most importantly, you'll see that when it comes to what we call your scheduled teaching. So you'll already see that information about the classes you teach, how many students were enrolled. That information is already there. We've also pre-uploaded information from the system about your advisees from the last year. We're still going to need you to do a little bit of heavy lifting and tell us the things we don't know, but I want you to know that some things are already in the system on your behalf. And it's really just a process of making sure that it's accurate and complete rather than having to start from scratch. Since I've already been talking at you for about 10 minutes, I usually like to do something a little bit dynamic at this point. And we'll talk about how you enter new data and records. So it's possible if you're watching this video and you've done this for the last couple of years, this might be the thing you need a quick brush up on. And as you think about putting together the information for the last 365 days, think about any of these things that might hold true to you, whether it's a form of service you did, a presentation you gave at a conference, a publication that you might have had in the last year. Some have been entered. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And the last one will be either that or an award or an honor. And Wilson or Sanita, since you're here in attendance with us, would one of you be willing to walk us through this and demonstrate this on your own behalf? Great.
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
Great, Sanita. So what I'll do is I will give you the power to
Oh
share
no,
your.
here we go.
Here we go. Here we go again. I am going to
Let's
one
see.
sec, give you the power to share.
Let's see. Screen 2.
Okay, I don't. Sorry, they've made a few changes in Zoom in the last week, so I
It looks like I can
oh
share.
Kevin, can you give Sanita the ability to share her screen? It looks like you're officially the host.
Oh,
I think you just logged on before me.
she should have the ability. It's unlocked.
Great.
I think this is mine. Here we go.
Fantastic. Yes, it looks great. Thank you. So tell us what kind of data you're going to upload about yourself.
Well, I've uploaded some of it, so
Okay, great.
hopefully maybe that will help.
Great.
So I, for example, I started my biography and expertise section.
Fantastic.
And so what I did was I basically went to my bio that I shared with the university to put on the webpage. And so I cut and paste and then just took a little bit of it and edited it down to make it more relevant for Trinity. And then I wrote in my areas of specialization and then just put some professional interest. I need to add some other interests.
Sure.
And then put in the courses. I'm new, so this is my end of my first semester. So right now I only teach fundamentals of accounting, but for spring of 2022, I am going to be teaching special topics in accounting class that I've created.
Fantastic. So
and then down here, I just put in my native language is English. I speak some Spanish, but not enough to brag about.
fantastic. So just so I understand, did you do most of this either typing in or this was just a straightforward copy paste?
I did some of it typing and some of it copy paste.
That's great. That's fantastic. And then as you go, I'm sure you knew this because it was already in the system, right? You saved things. But for most things, I find most people will find that this is fairly straightforward. You may find, like I said, that there may be more screens there that you choose to use or not to use. So maybe you'll fill out that other interests, or if you have a second or third language, you might fill that in. But by no means is it required, right? You just fill in the information that feels relevant to you and your story.
Lisa, one thing though, is I went to degrees and this may be being populated by someone else. It doesn't allow me to add anything.
Okay, so that's a good example. So, and I'll own that one. When we first went over to digital measures, I brought in whatever was in our database, but I have not been as good about doing that for faculty who have joined the institution in the last 2 years. So there are some screens on digital measures that are going to be called read-only screens. Degrees are one of them, scheduled teaching and advising are others. And it's because we want to make sure that what we have in our institutional databases match what folks have here. So if you shoot me an email afterwards, if you even just send me a copy of your CV, I can pull those things off manually. Anybody else who wants me to do that, let me know. I'll also talk to the folks in ITS about pulling another batch data and getting everything in for folks who have started in the last 2 years. But in those cases, so for example, if when you go, Sanita, if I could just ask you if you could look at that scheduled teaching screen since I'm talking about it. Yeah, it's in the third section that says teaching, mentoring, and librarianship. Excellent.
There we go. So these are my for this semester.
Exactly. And, you know, the reason we sort of want this to match the university records is because you should go in there and you should make sure that everything is accurate and complete. But if you thought you taught 7 or 8 classes and we only have you listed for 4, we'd want to know that, and we want to address that discrepancy. So we want to figure out if it's a data input error or if it was something else. So by all means, all faculty should go in and make sure that the data we've uploaded on your behalf is accurate. And if you see something that doesn't look right, reach out and let us know.
Cool.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Great. I think you can stop sharing. That's perfect.
All right. Back to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you for being a volunteer. It's never easy or fun. So I
No
appreciate
worries.
it. So in some ways, you know, that brings us right to the thing we had just started to discuss. Get my too many things open here. Used to be a way to do that up there. Sorry. Always a little rusty when people are watching. Okay. So we had just talked a little bit about the information that you want to verify about yourself. So this is information that we've put into the system. So if, for example, you notice something like your degrees are missing, or you notice that there's an error, let us know and kind of reach out to us, and we'll get those things updated and corrected. You should see all of the classes you taught for spring 21, summer 21, and fall 21. I always ask people to double check that their FYEs are listed correctly. In the past, we've had some data upload issues with any class that's co-taught. So if you have an FYE, or if there's another section that you co-teach with another person, make sure that you got credit for it on your record. This year, I was really excited to say that we've been able to upload your advising lists for both fall and spring. So in the past, I think we only had one list a year, but we know that there's a lot of variation. Students come in and out of majors, students graduate, but you should see in your record that you have two different lists. In some cases, it'll be the exact same number of students, but sometimes if you've had students graduate or change majors, you might see some differences. Again, I'll mention, like Sunita said, some of our degree information is missing, so we want to fill that in. There's a little bit of personal contact information. You probably see something in your system about the location of your office, but if there's things you want to add to it, let us know. And then the last piece is that you might see some of your publication data from the last year. I work with Jane Costanza in the library, and we pull over anything that's part of our digital commons record. So anything that's open access, it might be there. But by all means, you should double check it. And if it's there, that's great and it's accurate, don't worry about it. But if you have something that was, say, submitted for publication this year, but it hasn't been published yet, it's probably not going to show up. Or if you're writing for a journal that's not part of digital commons, part of open access, you won't see that as well. But just know that that's why some things might be there and other things won't. I usually like to pause here, and Sunita and Wilson, I know your disciplines a little bit. I'm not sure if there's going to be any preloaded publication data for either one of you. Do you know if there is? Probably not.
I'm teaching only, so I wouldn't have any.
You wouldn't have any. So, so folks at home, this is a good point to kind of log in, and you're going to select that screen that says publication data, and you'll be able to kind of log in and see what's already there. You also have the ability to, update any information about any of your co-authors. We also have the ability to upload either a PDF or something that's called the author's post-print manuscript if it's open access. We only bring in the kind of metadata about the file. We don't bring the file itself. So if you want that to be part of your record, you can absolutely add that in. I also like to tell people that if you don't want to go one by one, you have the ability to upload your publications as a batch. There's a few different ways to do this. Most people do it as a BibTeX file. Some people use a different, like a third-party software. Here it says Crossref or PubMed. I know that folks that are using the system for the first time, they often like to do this because they're able to pull over almost their complete publication history without having to do it manually. I'm happy to offer a little bit more support offline, or I will maybe refer you to any of our colleagues in physics and astronomy. I know that they love this feature in part because they often write papers with dozens or more co-authors. So if you don't necessarily want to enter the information for all of your co-authors, like the batch publications can be a really good, efficient solution. I'm going to pause for a minute here. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of things that are specific to the School of Business. So if you are not in the School of Business, you can feel free to fast forward until you stop seeing the slides that say School of Business only. Wilson Terrell, who's here with us today, will just be patient for a second. He can go use the restroom if he wants. There's a little bit more data that we track for faculty in the School of Business because it is required for the AACSB accreditation. So if you do have questions about this, I often want to refer you directly to Bob Shearer, the dean, and Jorge Collazo, the associate dean, because they could definitely answer a more technical question. I only have a pretty general understanding about this. But we know that one of the questions they'll ask is whether the document was peer reviewed or whether it was refereed. So was it kind of read by other faculty members and went through a peer review process, or did it go through a more of a kind of editorial reviewer? These are just drop-down menus. So once you know that about a publication, it's fairly straightforward. You'll also find that the third question is that they ask about the AACSB classification, and I'll show you what your choices will be on that menu. Again, these are the definitions that AACSB uses for things like peer-reviewed, editorially reviewed, and whether something is publicly available. And the answer is yes, if it can be found in like a library, even if it's behind a library firewall. But every faculty member in the School of Business, every time you have a publication, you're going to have to classify it as one of 3 different categories: basic or discovery scholarship, number 2, applied or integration application scholarship, and the third is teaching and learning scholarship. Sometimes that's called SOTL. I'm going to leave the definitions up here for a second, but I want to say that your specific questions about whether this is more this or more that, if it bridges categories, are probably answered by Bob or Jorge. If you're not in the School of Business, you have no reason to enter this information. We only pull data from faculty in the School of Business about this, so you'll never show up on one of their reports accidentally. We did this a little bit with Sunita a minute ago. Now is the point I can welcome everybody back because we're off the School of Business specific stuff. We talked a little bit about verifying your preloaded data for teaching. You have the ability to tell us a little bit more about your classes if that's something you want your chair to consider in your evaluation. You can click a box whether or not it was a new course preparation. If you wanted to, you could put your course syllabus in there. And like I said, if you notice a data error, like one of your classes is missing or the enrollment doesn't seem to match your records, you can reach out to me or Kevin or Martha, and we can definitely do some research and digging and find out where the discrepancy came from. But you remember what I said at the very outset of the training is that you enter things once and they live forever. So some people might like to use digital measures as kind of a backup system where they know they could always go back and they could look at their course syllabi, information that's just sort of in a separate place. It's there. It's not strictly required for annual evaluation. I just like to let you know that the option exists. Here is where we're going to do a little bit of work together, but at this point, you've really just been kind of moving your way through that activity screen, right? You've clicked all the links in the boxes that apply to you, and you've put your information in for the last year. And here's really where it all starts to come together. And it's in something called the annual activity report. So for the very first step, you're going to look right along the top of the menu bar, and you're going to see the tab that says reports. The second step is you're going to go to a report called the annual activity report. I want to say that you might not actually see a ton of reports on available to you on the screen. I see a little bit more as a system administrator, but when you go to that part of the screen, you'll actually see how the information from the database is sort of coming together in a nicely formatted report where you can see things. And here I'm going to exit for a second. Let's see here. Whoops. Before we get onto that, Wilson, could I ask, would you mind if I showed your report from last year?
That's fine.
Okay, Sunita, I wasn't going to show yours because you wouldn't necessarily have had one. So I am going to pretend that I'm Wilson. Thank you for being a volunteer. And sorry, that's not what I meant to do. Okay. So I'm going to run a report for Wilson in the last year. So when you go to this reports tab and then you scroll down to where it says annual activity report, the first thing it's going to ask you is the date range. So I'm going to run a report like it was last year, Wilson. So anything you would have put into the system last year. So it would have been 2020 to, I'm going to fix that, December 31st. Okay. When you run this for yourself, my understanding is you'll probably only be able to run it for yourself unless you're a department chair. Department chairs can run it for anyone they supervise. I'm just going to run it for one individual. Okay. Oh, because your last name is Terrell, not Wilson. Thank you. Okay. And then you're going to come up here to the upper right-hand corner and you're going to run the report. It happens really quickly. And I always like to tell people it ends up wherever your downloads go. So for me, it's in my my downloads bar, but it won't kind of just pop right up on the screen. So what I really like about this report is that it kind of takes everything that Wilson had entered into the system, and it's going to put it right into a really nicely formatted report, right? So we know that, right, that in the last year, Wilson had some awards. You were on leave for part of last year, Wilson, so you only saw one semester's worth of courses, but all of your courses are there. We know about your advisees. We can see your publications. And we can begin to see your entire service report of what came up in the last year. So this is really, I think, the place where the benefit comes in, because this is the report that's going to be automatically generated and included in your annual SPA. The other thing I really like about it is it should just leave the categories off that don't apply to you. So for example, you know, you saw on that opening screen, it said something like media appearances. So I'm guessing you didn't have any media appearances, but it doesn't come up to say like no data entered. It only pulls information from the fields where you entered data for the last year. I usually say that before we go on to the next thing we're going to talk about workflow, it's a good idea to run this report and make sure that it's accurate. So sometimes you'll look at it and you'll say, oh, I'm noticing there aren't any presentations listed here. Oh, I remember I did go to that conference in Baltimore. I need to enter that in. But it's a good way just to kind of double check that everything you thought was there is there. You might also notice something like you thought you entered a publication, but maybe when you went back and checked, the date wasn't accurate, or the date, said something about next year, so it's not showing up on this particular report. But this is kind of just a good kind of a check, like a gut check, whether you got everything. Thank you for volunteering, Wilson, to do that. I am going to kind of pause here for a second before we change gears and we talk about the next part of the program, which is called workflow, which is where you start to actually build your annual evaluation, just to see if either of you have questions about the digital measures tool itself, or what kind of information goes into the system and where it goes. Okay. You both seem okay, but if you do have questions, again, folks who might be watching this at home, there are always judgment calls you're going to have to make. Sometimes you're not sure if something belongs in one category or another. I really encourage faculty to kind of think about presenting the information in a way that tells their story most completely. I also want to say that it's worthwhile sometimes to have a conversation with your department chair, because they're the ones that are ultimately going to be on the receiving end of this information, and giving the information to them in a way that makes sense to them can often just be advantageous. But I know that some folks will have questions about how to use a screen. If we go back to the activity screen, sometimes I get some questions about this. One of the screens is called, let's see if we can find it, research activity. Some of these are really kind of straightforward, cut and dry, right? Like a publication, a presentation, a contract or a grant, an exhibition, an exhibit, a performance, like a patent award. But there is this one called research activity, and different faculty will use this in different ways. It's a fairly open screen. So you can title it whatever you want. You can give it a short description. If you have any collaborators that are either in the institution or at another institution, you can include it. And the most important thing is that you have to put some kind of date on it. So if you want it to be pulled into your annual report, it's really important that you note that this was an activity that happened in the last year. But I have seen people use this screen to talk about work that they are starting or work that's in progress, but has not yet progressed to the point of a grant award, a publication, a presentation. Sometimes people will use this to describe the activities of their lab, or kind of a collaboration with a colleague at another institution that is just sort of in that kind of process phase. But people like this ability to do this because it can really kind of speak to different kinds of effort and work that's ongoing that is not yet kind of to a point of completion. But I just like to mention the screen because I've seen people use it in different ways. And I would really kind of encourage you to use this screen if it's something like you feel like you have something that's like still took up a lot of time and energy and you want your chair to know about when they're completing your annual evaluation, but you don't necessarily have the kind of completed project for it just yet. Okay, trying to think if there's anything else. I think sometimes people find themselves in a similar situation, like where the line between consulting and service, where one ends and one begins. I think it's definitely worth having a conversation with your department chair about that, just to make sure that it's represented in a way that will make sense to the person evaluating you. Similarly, we always know that there are forms of service that are kind of fuzzy, that go between the university, your professional field, your discipline, and the community. Again, I kind of I ask you to sort of think about where you might just naturally put it on your CV. And if that makes good sense to you, run with it. But at this point, we're still in this kind of pilot phase. And one of the things that I think makes it really great is that we can actually see how people use the system, and that can inform how we think about the future. I am going to come back to our what we call workflow, which is kind of part 2 of the training. So part 1, and I actually recommend that people, even if you do it in one sitting, it can be helpful just to remind yourself that there's kind of 2 steps for the process. The first step is that you need to make sure that all of the information about you in the database is complete and accurate. That's what we've been doing, right? We've been looking at the screens, making sure that all of your information is there. But now we're going to start to actually build your evaluation for the last calendar year. That's going to rely on the information you pulled forward. And this is a kind of separate product that's all integrated, and they call it workflow. There's a few different ways to access it. At this point in time, you've probably already received an automated message saying you have an evaluation that's open. There should be a link right in that message that will take you right to your evaluation. But if you are accessing it from the Digital Measures Faculty Success platform, the first thing you'll do is you'll go to the menu bar that says More, and you'll choose Workflow. And I'll just give you kind of a little peek behind the curtain. What we did was we took what we have all kind of grown to know and love as our summary of professional activities statement, and we've tried to turn that into a digital form. So when you open up your annual evaluation in Workflow, you're going to see it really as an opportunity to upload a lot of different documents. And basically, we like to think about this as replacing the process in which you would have ordinarily emailed all of the separate attachments to your department chair. You're going to put it into this form, and the system is automatically going to route it first to your department chair, your dean if you're in the School of Business, and finally to the vice president for academic affairs. But you'll see as you go in there and you start to play with it, the first thing you might notice is that there's an opportunity to, you're going to see an icon for a PDF. That PDF is that annual activity report. So it's what we just looked at that Wilson was kind enough to volunteer. You'll be able to see all of that information that's already there. And I like to encourage people, if it's already there, you don't have to put it anywhere else, right? So if you don't have to like type another list of your classes, like that's the first thing your chair is going to look at. It's kind of the just the facts, ma'am approach. You'll also be asked to upload your current resume or CV. I think a lot of folks like to think of their summary of professional activities as a narrative. So you can upload your choice, a Word document or a PDF, where it's not just you talk about what you did, but you offer a little bit of context, right? Like, I've taken my research in a new direction, and so I've published this article in a topic I don't usually study. It's been really rewarding and gratifying to expand my scope of scholarship, right? It was the first time I've ever published with students. You can provide a little bit more context that just gives some shape to the person who's evaluating you. Last year, we really encouraged people to keep those documents to 2 pages. If you've read the memo from my colleague, Dwayne Colthorpe, you know that we do not have a strict 2-page limit this year for 2021, but we do want to encourage faculty to be brief. We know that there are many things vying for your attention, and the more kind of short and straightforward you can make this, it'll make your life easier. It'll also make the life easier of the person who's evaluating you. But please know that there is no hard limit this year. We give folks the option this year of uploading what we called last year as a COVID statement. So if you want to share any information with the person evaluating you about how your professional work was impacted by the pandemic, we encourage you to do so. That might be including an extenuating circumstance at home, or noting that you expected to have a book published this year, but because of delays in the supply chain or the review process, it's not going to be until next year. Feel free to bring any of that information to the attention of the person evaluating you, which in most cases will be your chair. You should upload all of your course evaluations for any courses that you taught in the last calendar year. If you've had any publications, you can add those as well. Again, it just sort of makes all of that information available to the person evaluating you. Anything else too, we use the word artifacts pretty generally. So if it wasn't a publication, but it came in another form, if you've had a recording or something like that, you can upload it. I think in most cases, the file sizes are limited to 1 gigabyte. So if you have something that's very illustration heavy or data heavy, we could talk offline about the best way to get that to your chair. The way I like to see it is that this format is really about automating the process. We know historically that folks would send their chairs a lot of attachments. Sometimes they would forget to attach something. There was a lot of back and forth. It just wasn't the best system. So this is something that will make it pretty easy. And as soon as an evaluation is done, it gets automatically routed to the next person in the queue. Your department chairs are going to evaluate your performance using a Likert scale that really maps onto your department's rubric. So if you need a copy of that rubric, what counts for exceptional, exceeds expectation, meets, or approaching expectations, reach out to your chair to get a copy of that. You'll know that we're still on the annual review cycle this year. We haven't yet moved to the 3-year cycle. So it should be a rubric that's pretty familiar to you in the past. My hunch is that these are already open for you. So if you expect to see an evaluation and it's not there, please reach out to me. I know things kind of shut down over break, but I will check my email periodically. So if you run into a real challenge, I will make sure that that gets set up for you. But I think it opened the day after Thanksgiving. Again, I like to encourage people to think about that as that kind of 2-step process. You put your data in, and then you look at your the report that comes up in your evaluation. And I like to just use this chance to remind people of all of the things they're going to need to complete their evaluation. So sometimes people might do a little bit of file management on their desktop, making sure that all of those files are handy. So it just becomes really a process of uploading rather than having to toggle between too many screens. But like I said, you'll want your CV, you'll want all of your course evaluations, any kind of relevant artifacts, so things like your publications or information about an exhibit you might have had, and then that optional COVID statement. I want you to know that whether you're in digital measures or you're using the traditional summary of professional activities, the deadlines are exactly the same. So you will submit everything to workflow by Wednesday, January 19th. Your department chairs have until March 9th to review that information, to give you a rating on a category, and to provide you some annual feedback about the year you had and looking to the year ahead. There's one more week built in. So after it goes to the department chairs in the School of Business, it also goes to your dean for review. And then after that step, the very last step is that it all goes to the vice president for academic affairs, and she'll have a period of time in which she reviews your file, and then she meets with your chair and or dean to talk about your performance. And that's what really drives the merit raise process. This has been, maybe some people think too long of a training, some people think too short. So you might have some questions that you have. I've already sent out and shared today's slides, but you can look for a link to this video very soon. We keep everything on the Team Dynamics Trinity website. So even if you just go to the Trinity homepage and you type digital measures, it'll take you right to these materials. You can see this. I also have like a 5 or 6 minute video that just reminds you of the real basics if you don't have 45 minutes to watch this. I'd encourage you, as sort of a first point of question, you can send your questions to academictechnology@trinity.edu. And we have a whole bunch of drop-in hours where you can get help in both December and January. I'll show you a schedule of that in just one second. And if you're really feeling overwhelmed by this process and you don't know that you can do all of the data entry, I would really encourage you to talk to your departments. Departments have worked out some ways in which they can offer some assistance and support if you have a lot of information to bring over and it's just feeling a bit too overwhelming. We are learning a lot from the departments that are part of the pilot. You've helped us make some really good changes. You've helped us really make sure that that annual activity report meets your needs. The folks in the library, we made some changes to the screen called librarianship based on your feedback. We really want to know if that feedback works. But by all means, if you come to something and you just have a question or you have a suggestion, we definitely invite it. I try to be really transparent with you about what I know is a limitation of the system and I wish we could control, but it's set by the manufacturer. And whenever we have the ability to make tweaks or changes, I work with our team at the company to try to get those changes made. I will mention to everyone that this is sort of what we have coming up. You'll keep in mind that the deadline is January 19th. We're doing one real life training before break. We'll have one real live training where you can get your questions answered after break on January 11th. And really after we come back from break, I'm really grateful to my colleagues in ITS who have identified some pretty generous drop-in help times, including one that's just a couple of days before the deadline. You can either go in person to EHCL 101YY. If you don't know what those letters mean, you go to the lowest level of the library, you take a left and you'll see a sign for the ITS training room. You can get help right then and there. There will be computers, you can log in and someone can sit with you and answer the questions that are specific to you. If you prefer, there's a Zoom link and you can get real-time support in this while people are sitting in the same room. I know that we're all watching Omicron really carefully. So I just want to let you know that if we're not able to be in person, we will be there virtually to support you. As I kind of move towards a conclusion, I just like to give folks just like the real straightforward wrap up, and then I'm here to answer some questions for folks who might have them. Just like what is it that I have to do again? I would say that you probably want to budget about an hour or so to go into the data, the digital measures or the faculty success database, and you make sure that all of your information for the last year is there and that it's complete, right? That your classes look good. You've entered any other information that you might have, publications, presentations, awards, etc., and that you kind of get that piece taken care of. And then whether you want to do it on the same day or a different day, you'll want to pull up that workflow document. And for most people, that is really primarily the work of dragging in files. So you're bringing over your narrative, you're bringing over your course evaluations, a COVID statement if you have it. But it's that kind of 1-2 punch. And you just want to make sure that you hit submit on your workflow, your kind of electronic SPA before Wednesday, January 19th. And trust me, if you haven't submit, if you haven't actually submitted that, the system is going to barrage you with reminders. So there's nowhere that you will just forget to do this. And we're here to help if you need it. I want to thank everyone today for kind of queuing in and watching. Stop sharing my screen. And I'm also going to stop the recording, but I'm going to stick around to answer some questions for Wilson and Sanita if they have any.